Ladies and gentlemen, members, can I just call the meeting to order? Good morning. I'm Neil Odin. I'm the Clerk of the Fire Authority and I'm the Chief Fire Officer. I'm delighted to welcome you here this morning. Welcome to our 2025 Annual General Meeting of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire and Rescue Authority. I'm opening the meeting in the capacity of the Authority Clerk. This meeting is being held at our Fire and Police Shared Headquarters at Eastleigh. The meeting is being recorded for broadcast on the Authority's website and will be available for repeated viewing. The press and members of the public are also permitted to film and broadcast this meeting. Those remaining at the meeting are consenting to being filmed and recorded, and to the possible use of those images and recording for broadcasting purposes. There is no scheduled fire alarm test today. In the event that the alarm sounds, please leave the building by the nearest and safest fire exits. Follow officers who will guide you to the fire muster point in the car park. As ever, you have a microphone which must be activated by pressing the button to ensure the voice is clearly heard on the broadcast. So my last duty as the clerk is to enter item 1, please, the election of chairman. Can I ask members call for nominations to appoint a chairman for the current municipal year until the next annual general meeting of the authority in 2026. Do I have any nominations? Councillor Price.
Can I propose Ridley and Vaughan?
Thank you very much. And do I have a seconder for Councillor Vaughan?
Yes, I would be delighted to second Councillor Ridley and Vaughan.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations for chairman? Okay, thank you. In which case, I'll ask then for members to vote on the nomination for Councillor Ridley and Vaughan to be the chairman of the authority. All those in favour? That's unanimous. That saves me a job. Thank you very much. In which case, I'm delighted to welcome new chairman of the Fire Authority for this municipal year, Councillor Ridley and Vaughan.
Can I do the vice chairman from here?
I'd best you move, otherwise I'll confuse the cameras.
Coffee. And the water. Do I get a sandwich as well? We're on. Members, thank you very much indeed for your continued support. I will endeavour to earn it, as usual. I mean, it's... well, let me just get the next bit over first, which is electing a vice chairman. And I propose that the vice chairman be Roger Price. And, seconded by Karen. All those in favour for Roger Price? Excellent. Up here, please, Roger. We've, as an authority, we've got an interesting year coming up. It'll be more interesting when we know actually what is really happening. But I think our aim is to ensure that the fire service, in 11 months' time, when something is going to happen, that the fire service is in the best possible place it can be. And to advise what is happening, that the fact that I don't think for a moment that a deputy mayor, on his own, on his or her own, will do as good a job looking after the fire service as we do. I mean, I think we've proved to the world that 11 is a pretty good number to help the fire service. And I would be recommending that whoever is the deputy mayor actually has some sort of fire authority under them to continue the work that we do. So that's what we're fighting for. And of course, we've got to fight for money and all the things which have been conspicuously denied us. Because I'm fed up with the fire service being the Cinderella of everything. It's not good enough. Anyway, there we go. So, give me paperwork. Next up then is apologies for absence. Adam?
No apologies have been received.
Okay, thank you. Declaration of interest. Anybody? Nope. Minutes for the last meeting. Anybody got any comments on the minutes of the last meeting? If you have, speak. If you haven't, no? Okay. Chairman's No, deputations. We have a deputation for the Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Brigade Union. So can I ask you, please, sir, if you would like to bring forth your deputation?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. For those of you that don't know me, my name's Dave Hunt. I'm Chair for both Hampshire and Isle of Wight Fire Brigades Union and for Region 12 of Fire Brigades Union. I'm here to raise concerns around the cuts that we're facing within the service, or will be facing within the service this year and next year. I think, Chair, you just mentioned that we're Cinderella. And also you mentioned that we need more funding. That's what I very briefly want to take some of your time to talk about. So I will apologise early if some of these figures are slightly wrong, because it's quite hard to work out quite where we are financially. But the latest figures I could see were proposed savings for 25-26 of around £1.7 million out of our budget, particularly from a ops and a service delivery point of view. And as recently communicated by our Chief Fire Officer, a further £0.9 million in 26-27, again out of our service delivery. So for this year, we're looking at reducing grey book frontline staffing of 28 whole-time roles, ranging from firefighters right up to group managers. They all play a critical role in the roles that they're currently doing. We're closing 2 fire stations under these proposals. Whilst we're not saying we're closing them, we're going to stop our operational response. We are essentially closing 2 fire stations on the Isle of Wight. We're removing frontline fire engines from the service. We've got a trial to remove second appliances from a number of our on-call stations, our retained stations. Management restructuring within the Ops Directorate of our middle managers. That's where some of those station manager and group manager roles are coming from, that are vital for those group structures as they currently are. And that is in addition to the on-call retained firefighter roles that we won't be recruiting to. On those stations where we're removing fire engines, we won't be recruiting back to establishment. On our 2 fire stations on the Isle of Wight, we won't be recruiting to stations that are closed. Only last year, we went through the refocusing operations process. That removed frontline positions as well. That removed whole-time firefighters from stations across Hampshire. There was some reinvestment back into the Isle of Wight, but not all of it into Ryde. We lost whole-time response. We're losing resilience. We're losing fire engines on a daily basis at the minute due to those cuts, let alone the ones that are around the corner. As I said, we're seeing on a daily basis now a removal of fire appliances from our major cities. Southsea, St Mary's are 2 prime examples of fire engines that are there for a reason, being taken off the run day to day because we need to move people across the county, across our organisation. Not only are we seeing the fire engines being taken off the run, but we're seeing our special appliances either being taken off the run or double jumped, which essentially we're using 4 people to fill 8 seats on fire engines. That can't continue. Surely that can't continue. It's only going to get worse when we remove these further positions. Very simply, if implemented, these cuts will increase response times across the service. We will increase the rate of attack that we have on those incidents when they occur. It's not just about getting that first fire engine there, it's about getting the second, third, fourth, however many fire engines we need in that amount of time that we as firefighters, we can actually deliver the service our public expects of us when we turn up. From a middle manager's point of view, our officer members have already got somewhat unachievable workloads. By removing a number out of their structures, those workloads are only going to increase, and we're expecting more out of those fewer officer members and middle managers. I've touched briefly on the resilience within our service. We move firefighters around our organisation on a daily basis. People turn up to work at Southsea and then get sent to Rushmore or Basingstoke. That happens now. We struggle now and we remove appliances that should be available to the public because we can't spread those people thinly enough. And now we're proposing to take more people out of that. Ultimately, we are undermining both public safety and firefighter safety by doing this. I've mentioned that weight of attack. As firefighters, we need to know that we've got the right amount of people turning up at incidents so that we're as safe as the people we're going to try and help. Firefighters and the Fire Brigades Union are immensely proud of the work we do within our communities, but we need the right amount of people, the right fire engines in the right places at the right times to be able to do that. I've spoken to members, I've spoken to people on stations, I've spoken to managers, our service leaders, and these cuts are whilst they're localised to certain stations or certain staff groups, they affect the whole service. They affect all of Hampshire, they affect all of the Isle of Wight. They are widespreading. In the Chief Fire Officer's March briefing, and this is a quote, that this service no longer has the finances it needs to run its operation. We fully agree with that. The Fire Brigades Union put a lot of weight and support in the last general election around the Labour Party, and the Labour Party being the saviours of the fire and rescue sector. So far, that hasn't seemed to be the case. We're also seeing an increase in certain call types. At a time when we're looking and almost racing to the bottom to save money, reduce fire engines, reduce firefighters, climate change is having a massive impact. We're only into June, but we're seeing wildfires across the county that we're sending lots of firefighters, lots of appliances to. When we remove those appliances, remove those firefighters, we can't send the same amount of resources to those sorts of incidents. So just to very quickly close, the Fire Brigades Union are calling on you, our Fire Authority, to stop these proposed cuts immediately. Stop the work that's been done. But as soon as we remove firefighters, as soon as we remove fire engines and close fire stations, it is going to be very hard, if not impossible, to reverse those. So let's stop those now. Can we think about a full and detailed review into the work that we currently undertake within Hampshire and Isle of Wight? The roles and the work that we have to do, the non-statutory work that we do, but we do out of goodwill, but it still costs us money when we don't need to spend it. And can we reassess our financial situation again? Can we work together? Can we lobby local government for fair funding that reflects the growing demands on us as a fire and rescue service? The Fire Brigades Union, we've always been keen and ready to work constructively with our service managers, and we look forward to working with you as a fire authority, and where we can, lobbying, working with government both locally and nationally. And finally, we just urge you, please put safety first, stop these cuts, and let's find a better way to move forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, clearly, I can't give you an answer now, but we take this seriously. And I do particularly, Bembridge is one of my pet places, so I take it very seriously. So we'll certainly keep informed. That's what we do. Thank you. Thank you. Welcome to our Police and Crime Commissioner, Donna. Good morning. Good morning. Okay, so item 7 now, Chairman's announcement. I am thrilled to announce that our very own Zoe Huggins was awarded a British Empire Medal in the King's Birthday Honours List. So nice to have someone else with a medal around here. So well done, Zoe.
I'm sure everyone's trying hard to catch up.
Yeah, well, do. So a few things, Chairman's announcement. It is with sadness, and you know all about it, to express our sincere condolences about the 2 firefighters from Oxford and the civilian who lost their lives in the line of duty while tackling a large fire at a former RAF base. Our heartfelt thoughts go out to the families, friends and colleagues during this painful time. I wrote to Rob, who some of you met, expressing our condolences as an authority, and he replied very nicely back. So please join me in 1 minute silence, please, for those who perished. Thank you. Chief, any comments? Nothing. Okay. Next item, we have appointed our new Chief Fire Officer, Sabrina, who is over there in the public gallery. Welcome, Sabrina. I think we'll ask you formally to come and meet everybody probably at the next APAG, which will be the one to come. Anyway, you're very welcome. And congratulations. Chief, you want to say anything? Public consultation is now open on operational change. The service has launched a public consultation on how we operate on the Isle of Wight, as you heard mentioned. The proposals include ceasing the operational responses at Bembridge Fire Station, combining Yarmouth and Freshwater fire stations, and removing the aerial ladder platform from Newport Fire Station. These are part of a broader change programme across the service. The consultation remains open until July the 29th. But, and we appreciate what you've said in your deputation. Yep.
And just to add, members, and thank you also to Dave for his comments as well from the Fire Brigades Union. Obviously, we want this consultation to be meaningful, and members, as we've briefed you on before, please, if you're getting information in from your constituents or other people who want to let you know how they feel about things, please do channel them in to the consultation. Let us have those thoughts and feelings and issues, and we'll do our best to consider those. Well, we will consider them during the consultation, but do our best to answer the questions as well, particularly. But do think about your role as scrutinising the decisions we make and making sure that you use that information to really clearly look at the paper we'll bring to you in August when it comes to defining what we do intend to actually do on a basis of what we heard during the consultation as well. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thanks. Next, I would invite the Chief Fire Officer to make a comment on the comprehensive spending review that has been published.
Again, once again, in line with what was mentioned by our deputation earlier, the comprehensive spending review, it's not unusual for it not to go into too much detail around fire and rescue. I know Catherine's been and Rob have been looking at the details of the spending review, but it is incredibly quiet about fire and rescue as a sector. Now, that doesn't surprise me in one sense, but equally it is worrying given the climate we find ourselves in as a sector in terms of struggling with resourcing and quite understandably, the government of the day puts its priorities in certain areas. But our concern continues as officers that if we don't make a very strong lobbying point, which the National Fire Chiefs Council and the LGA are making on our behalves, if that doesn't win through in some way during the detailed discussions about how the CSR manifests in actual department spending, we may be in some trouble in the future. So it's really to put it on your radars. It's concerning that we've not been mentioned specifically, despite nationally a campaign to recognise things like fire stations are falling down, which we've had our own examples of, and some really challenging times for us that could be difficult in the future if things don't change in the long term.
Okay, thanks, Chief. Donna, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of things to say about the CSR impact for policing. Yes, it's not a dissimilar situation, perhaps a little bit more information shared around that, and particularly government reaffirming the commitment of the 13,000 police officers to rebuild neighbourhood policing, which is obviously incredibly welcome. And we did see the first tranche of that money in February this year, started on the 1st of April, which enabled me to increase the number of police officers in Hampshire from 50, I was hoping to announce from the 1st of April, to 90, which was really good. Moving forward over the next 3 years up to 2029, I think it's going to be incredibly difficult for all police forces. We are perhaps more resilient than others because we have got some reserves, but I think that it is tough times coming, and we are now moving towards looking at a reduction in spending programme, much the same as you are currently doing here. One other point, Chair, if I can, it's lovely to see you here as well, new Chief Fire Officer. And just to confirm that the new Chief Constable has also been appointed. His name is Alexis Boone. He is currently a Deputy Assistant Commissioner in the Metropolitan Police Service. He is the head of local policing at the moment. So he's got about 24,000 police officers under him, eye-watering, in the Met. And he starts here on the 4th of August. So we're going to have a whole new chapter. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna. Thank you. Next item, Urban Search and Rescue Team Award. Our Urban Search and Rescue Team picked up the Heavy Rescue of the Year prize. Does that mean the prize was heavy? Or
It was.
Before could you just explain what Heavy Rescue do? If it's not that obvious.
Of course. So our Urban Search and Rescue team, the team was created on the back of 7/7 and 9/11 back in the day of New Dimensions. So it is really there for things like building collapse and large building or vehicle extrication and rescue. So they're very, very capable. And if, at some point we can arrange a show around some of the things they do for members to have a look at.
Okay, great. So just continuing on this article, our team demonstrated exceptional response to the devastating gas explosion in Jersey, which you will remember. Over 10 arduous days, 20 dedicated firefighters and officers worked tirelessly, employing extensive heavy lift and innovative techniques to rescue victims with dignity and precision. Despite complex logistical challenges, their unwavering commitment and collaboration spirit with local and national partners provided crucial support to the affected community, for which they got their prize. So well done them. Just a few things. I and some of you attended a few nights ago the volunteer evening here, which, if you've never been to one, it is wonderful. I mean, these people, they give so much to help fire-related issues. And it is a splendid evening, and the Lord Lieutenant was here, and I know some of you are here as well. So if you haven't been to one of these, do come to the next one, because it's worth it, isn't it, Lou? It is a permission for bottom lip to wobble moment. I mean, very, very emotional. Very good stuff. So well done them. Right, item 8 then, members' developments. Anybody? I would like in the coming year to just to should we say, rekindle the enthusiasm that we all have for our separate roles within the fire service. And if you want a reminder what they are, see me afterwards. But I think we should keep that going, because that is one of our strengths. And it maintains our close connection with the people who we serve in Hampshire. Does anybody have anything in terms of members' development they would like to say? Something they've done? Lou, please.
Is that on? Right. Yeah. I did attend the event on the 3rd of June for the volunteers, and it was amazing to see the contributions that have been made and the amount of hours that local people give to assist the fire and rescue service. I also attended a local response forum on Friday just gone. And after the volunteer event, I have now been invited to 3 stations to have a look around. So I'm looking forward to doing that in the coming months. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Sally.
Yes, on the, I think it was the 3rd of June. Let me just double check, sorry. 4th of June. I've been appointed on the Labour group to sit on the Fire Commission. So I went to the LGA. It was my first experience of sort of networking with people in fire. I found it really interesting. Devolution came up, as well as possibly having a college of fire like the police do, and having fire as its own identity away from police. When we go into having a mayor and deputy mayor, we all think it's really important that fire keeps its own identity. I'm going to try and come to more fire cadets and other events that we get invited to, but I'm noticing that more and more of them are on a Thursday and Friday, and I find that hard because of working around my shifts. But if I'm available, I'll always try and attend as many things as I can.
Okay, thanks, Sally. Fran, please.
Yeah, I also attended the volunteers event, and on my table there was a young man called Ashley, and he was a photographer for the fire service, and he sort of fell into it, and he's now thinking of a career going forward in the fire service, which I thought was really interesting. He was a very young fella. Also, thank you to the police choir who sang, and it was just a very enjoyable evening. And I also went with Lou on the 13th of June to the Critical Threats and Major Incidents Conference, which was really interesting. And based on, I've written an article for my residents. I feel we have to be, there's a balance between scaring people and informing people and making sure they're prepared for these events. But, you know, we have sort of imminent threats that are there. And I think it's really it was a very useful thing to remind me the seriousness of some of these things that we face possibly in the future. And if anyone wants to brief themselves again on the LRF and the work it does, it's really worthwhile. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Frank. Roger.
Well, I've attended 2 or 3 NJC meetings, which is to do with the Joint Negotiating Committee. And I'm pleased to say that both the firefighters and the Gold Book has now been agreed for pay for the coming year. So for the very first time, I think, certainly on the firefighters, it's been agreed so it can be paid for the 1st of July, because usually been backdated, because it's taken a long time to get it agreed after the date. So this time it will be on time. So I've been to those. I've also been to an ERG meeting, which was with the Inspectorate on inspections and what they're proposing for the coming year. I've also been to the volunteers evening. I've also been to the Fire Commission, as Sally mentioned, and a Fire Service Management Committee. And in answering your point at the beginning, Chairman, is that the LGA is pushing to try and get written into the agreement that whatever the system is, with the mayor or the deputy mayor taking over fire, that there will be a committee, and they've called it a panel, which will be part of it, and that would be structured. They want something similar to this, so they would be advising the mayor or deputy mayor, and that's what's being pushed for nationally. So we've got to support that all the way along the line, I think, and push where we can to make sure that happens.
Good, good. Thank you, Roger. Anybody else? Okay, thank you. Then moving on to item 9, which is pages 9 to 28 in your paperwork. The appointments report, and I would invite Paul Hodgson to introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. So most members will be familiar with the structure of this report, as it's very similar to a version that comes annually to the authority for the annual meeting. And it sets out the political membership of the authority following each constituent authority's annual meetings in May, It then sets out the political groupings and allocation of seats across the two committees on the authority. And those political groups have changed slightly since publication of papers. And we now have 3 political groups: Conservative group with 5 members, Liberal Democrat and Labour group with 3 members, and the Independent Alliance also with 3 members. So we've circulated an updated proportionality table, so an update to Appendix 2, setting out the new seat allocation across those committees. And so we're asking the authority to appoint members to those in accordance with the updated Appendix 2. The report then goes on to deal with a number of other appointments and related matters. So it does include appointments to 3 working groups: the Principal Officer Pay Review Group, a working group to review the Members' Allowance Scheme this year, and also a Sprinkler Working Group. So currently the report asks for 3 members to be appointed to each of those, but if members prefer, those appointments could be held over to a later meeting. There's then confirmation of minority group spokesperson or persons. So we just ask that members clarify and confirm who the relevant minority group spokespersons are. And then in this year's report, we've also covered the appointment of a new independent person, and that's necessary because our current independent person's appointment expires. So that's covered in the recommendations, noting there is actually a typo at paragraph 20D. The appointment is with effect from June 2025, not June 2026. So just bear that in mind when approving that one. And then there's the usual confirmation of the appointment of the chair of the 3S Fire CIC Stakeholder Committee as the shareholder representative for the purposes of the company's Articles of Association. So that's a fairly normal thing that we do each year. And then, unusually in this report, it has a section dealing with the proposed appointment of Rob Sarfas as the Interim Chief Financial Officer, replacing Catherine, who will move to the Deputy Chief Financial Officer, and that's for the reasons set out in the report. And then finally, the report covers off the usual dispensations that we agree each year at the annual meeting, just to make sure there are no arguments about members having disclosable pecuniary interests in matters related to setting the precept or matters related to the members' allowance scheme. So covers quite a lot there, but hopefully we can just work through the recommendations and cover those things off.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, well, let's do that then. Let's start with audit and governance. And I would suggest that the chairman of that committee is David Harrison. You okay with that, David? And the vice chairman is David Drew. Right. Two Davids. Oh, lovely. So in terms of the allocation, so my lot have got 2 people. So one is David Drew then, and the other would be Fran? No? Okay. Or would you like to go on it, Stephen?
I'm very happy to, Chairman.
Okay. So Stephen Parker. The Lib Dems 2 is David Harrison, clearly, and
Sally.
And Sally. And the Independent 1 is
we're putting forward Councillor Louise. Thank you.
Lou. Okay. Good. So then 3S Fire, I would recommend as chairperson Sally.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
So that's your 1. For Conservatives, I would recommend as vice chair Fran. So that's, and we need 1 more from me. So that would be Zoe. Yeah. And we need 2 from the Independents, please.
That'll be myself and Karen, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And is that enough, Paul?
Yes, I mean, if members confirm they agree those appointments, that would deal, I think, with recommendations, recommendations 4 and 5, I think.
Okay. And then the others we can do.
There are a number of other, it's probably worth going through the recommendations, Chairman, just in order, and obviously you've dealt with the appointments to the committees, but there are a number of other appointments that need to just be covered off.
I know Roger's mad keen on his sprinklers. So you don't want to leave that. Do I have to read out the pages of recommendation?
Well, I think you don't necessarily have to read the recommendations, but I think you need to take the members to each one and agree.
All right, members, I need to go through each one. I hope you're sitting comfortably. Right, the recommendations are that the authority approves the schedule of meetings of the authority and its committee for the coming year at Appendix 3, that the purpose of Part 1 of the Local Government and Housing Act, the authority agrees that the allocation of seats on the Audit and Governance Committee and 3SFAR Stakeholders Committee of the authority be set out in Appendix 2 of the report. So we've done that. Are you happy with that?
It's in the updated appendix.
Yeah, okay. That the authority appoints members of the Audit and Governance Committee and 3SFAR Stakeholder Committee and their respective chairman and vice chairman following the agreement of the allocation of thing. We've done that. That with regard to the Pensions Board, the authority note the position and appointments are set out in paragraph 20 of the report. Your pensions, are you happy?
I think I need to be reappointed. Because I think my term of office finishes.
Yeah.
Roger is the chair of the representative.
So have we elected Roger, or shall we elect Roger?
Sorry, as the
Chairman.
for the principal officer pay working group.
No, pensions.
Roger's, yes, we've already done that appointment at the last meeting. So, yes.
Congratulations. Well done.
It was covered off in April, I think.
Right, number 7, that the authority agree that APAG includes all appointed authority members as set out in paragraph 20. Yep, okay. That the authority appoints 3 members and identifies one of these as chairman to an informal working party of the principal pay officers review. We'll do that later, I think. I mean, we have idea, but we can do that later. That the minority group spokesman is confirmed until the annual meeting of the authority in 25, which is you, George. That the authority appoints Amanda Lewis as the independent person for the authority for a 4-year term, which we've done. That the authority agrees that the chairman of the stakeholder committee be appointed as the shareholder representative of 3SFAR, pursuant to Article 42 of the Articles of Association of 3SFAR, as set out in paragraph 20. And we have done that. That's you, Sally. That members note the allowance in the members' allowance scheme for 2025, as set out in Appendix 4, and appoint 3 members to a working group to undertake a review and make recommendations for a new scheme to the full authority in February 26. Yeah.
I was going to say on that one, Chair. Should we defer that one? I mean, if the fire authority more than likely won't exist in its current capacity, from where the mayor gets elected, is there any point in spending any officer time or any resources on doing a review of the members' allowance scheme when the members won't be members in when the scheme takes place?
Sensible point, Paul.
Do you want to go first? I don't mind. I mean, I think it's a fair point, but as things stand at the moment, the current scheme effectively expires at the end of this current financial year. So we will have to do something if we are still in existence and members want to receive allowances from April 26 onwards. Okay. Now, it may be that that's relatively short-lived, and I think we try and do it as proportionately and briefly as we can.
But we can put that on the back burner for the moment.
We could, you could defer the appointment to that group to another meeting if you want.
That's what we'll do. Done?
Just to say that I think there's every possibility that this body would remain until 2028, by the way, because the existing English devolution bill legislation has been delayed, and if it's not laid down in Parliament before summer recess, then the 6 mayors being elected in May 26 will be elected on the existing legislation, which does not allow to automatically wind up a fire authority or a police and crime commissioner's powers, which means then you'd have those two bodies running in parallel, and the mayor quite possibly would not take them over officially until May 28.
So, Chair,
Things are looking up.
what does the mayor do?
I'm getting as excited as a very excited person. This is good. George, you were saying?
Do you know what? It's probably a conversation for another day about devolution, local government reorganisation. I'm just curious of what the mayor's role would then be for the 2 years if the bodies can't dissolve.
I think.
Or deputy mayor even.
George, you're right. That's for another day.
Yeah, it's another day. Yeah.
Fran?
I just think, listening to what Donna has said, we should just carry on and get somebody appointed to it and just do it as normal.
Well, we will, but we won't do it now. Okay? Fine. Hang on, which one are we on?
Asking the question. I can ask
3
why we're
members.
not doing it
Well,
now.
we can do it now if you want.
Each group can put one person.
3 members. Who would like to be a member of this panel? Karen? David? And David. Right? 2 Davids. It's getting
and a Karen.
monotonous. David, and Karen. Paul? Paul? Got them?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. All right. And we've done the minority group spokesman. We've done Amanda Lewis. We've done that one. The allowances, done that one. That the authority grant dispensation under sections 33 2A and D of the Localism Act, expiring on 30th of June, in respect to the provision of section 31. What does that mean, Paul?
Section 30.
Then to read those fully now, as long as members have read them and confirm they agree with them.
Okay, read them.
Agreed.
To all members to enable them. Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. You're reading. To all members to receipt. Yeah, you're reading that. That the authority appoints Rob Sarfath to be the authority's interim chief financial officer, and Catherine Edgecombe to the intern deputy chief financial officer, with effect from the 17th of June 25, in accordance with paragraph 25 and 30. Okay with that? That the authority agrees the terms of reference at Appendix 5 and appoints 3 members to a working group to review the authority's position statement on sprinklers, with a view to making recommendations to the full authority later in the year. Roger, we can do that now. You're in charge of it. Who would you like?
I would like to increase the number to 5, because I think it's far better to have 5 members involved on this, because it is a very important issue as far as I'm concerned anyway. It's not for me to appoint them.
Right, well,
I think if
five
we've got
members.
5, I think sort of independents, Conservatives and us. George, how many would you want? 1, 2?
I'm happy for it. I'm happy for it to be. Happy for it to be 5,
sorry, I haven't
but
turned it on. Try it
that's
now.
all right.
There
It's
you
working
are.
now. I'm happy for it to be 5. We'll happily nominate 1. Should I do it? Yeah, I'll do it. That's fine. From our group.
Okay.
Yours 2.
You're leading it.
Right, 2 for you,
Yeah.
and we'll have 2 then.
Fran would like to be on it, and 1 more from us, please. Stephen? Sprinklers are exciting things. It's good.
David? David's our other one.
Right, so that's 5. Right, Paul, got that? Good. Phew. So that's that then. Thank you very much. Let us move on to item 10, which is on page 29 of your paperwork, the outturn report. And Catherine, if you'd like to lead on, please.
Good morning, members. So in light of the previous paper, I'm actually just going to introduce Rob, who is going to introduce the outturn report So I'll just pass over to Rob, who's going to present the outturn report.
Thank you, Catherine. So I'm going to give you a run through of the outturn position for the 24-25 financial year. So I'll talk through the revenue budget position, give an update on the capital programme, cover off reserves, and also talk about the medium-term financial position. So looking first of all at the revenue position, so the authority achieved an underspend of £1.1 million last year, about 1.1% on the budget. This was broadly in line with the amount that was forecast in the Q3 report. This underspend was primarily for two reasons, so one to do with staffing and one to do with income generation. So from a staffing point of view, there are a number of vacancies which contributed to the underspend. There was the impact of on-call availability and also a number of firefighters being in the development phase, which doesn't take up the full budget allocation for those posts within the establishment. From an income point of view, there was the benefit of additional rental and service charge income related to the work that the corporate services team do with partners to utilise the space that the authority has in its estate. And we also had the one-off benefit of some income from the disposal of assets. So below a certain threshold, the disposal of assets results in income to the revenue budget. Above £10,000, it counts as a capital receipt and has to be classified as capital income. So you'll also see that within the capital programme section. So the recommendation in February was agreed in principle that an underspend this year would be added to the budget equalisation reserve. The intention being to help the authority's future financial resilience, so linked into the medium-term financial plan position, which indicated a budget gap in 26-27, and so that recommendation is in the report this time. There's also a recommendation for a number of carry forwards to be approved. So these carry forwards predominantly relate to the estate. It's very difficult sometimes to fit work on property into neat financial years, and so this just reflects a change in the timing of the delivery of that work rather than a change in what is being done. So that covers off the revenue budget position. So in terms of the looking forward to the future with the medium-term position, there are a number of factors that are outside of the authority's control that have an impact on that financial position. So as was mentioned earlier, the spending review last week didn't provide any real future clarity for the authority. So we'll be continuing to monitor things as they take place over the course of the remainder of the year to see what impact that will have on the budget setting process in February. We've typically received only a single year settlement, typically around December time, which builds into the budget for the February. We understand that there will be a 3-year settlement this time, which, whilst it might not provide any additional funding, from a financial planning point of view, will at least help with providing some greater certainty to factor into the forward look. The other thing that has been affecting us over recent years has been the high level of inflation within the economy. Obviously, that's come down a lot over the last couple of years. But any time that there is inflation, even at a low percentage, it still means that prices are going up and need to be covered through additional funding. We've got the impact of the pay award this year. So the firefighters' Grey Book pay award has been agreed, and there's a proposal for Green Book. Both of these amounts are above the amount that was budgeted, and while we can cover that from within contingencies, that obviously reduces the ability to deal with anything else that might come up throughout the year. This then links into the savings position and the importance of delivering the savings as planned and in a timely manner. So the budget report in February set out savings of £1.7 million for this year, alongside a planned draw of £1.8 million from the budget equalisation reserve to balance the budget. And the report provides an update on how those savings plans are progressing. So what we have seen since February is further work being done on the middle manager and organisational design savings. That has provided an update in terms of when those savings can be delivered, which is shown in the graph. And we've also got an offsetting benefit in terms of the lower costs that we'll be seeing for the airwave contract for the remainder of that contract. So I'll now move on to talking about the capital programme. So the programme continues to progress with the delivery of the items that have been approved. This is mainly focused on the estate and the vehicle replacement programme. There are potential items in the future that continue to be scoped that may need to be added to the programme, and obviously those will be brought back to get approval to add to the programme along with any identified funding source at the appropriate time. For the time being, the updated capital programme you see within your report pack is merely reprofiling expenditure based on the delivery of work in the current, in the 24-25 financial year, reprofiling across future years. That then leads us on to the reserves position. So you'll see that the reserves have remained broadly flat during the last financial year, but then the graph in the report pack shows reserves trending downwards in future years. That's a combination of meeting planned expenditure set out within the earmarked reserves and also the draws from the budget equalisation reserve to support the financial position on the revenue budget. And then there's a recommendation that the one-off saving from a credit on previous years of the airwave contract is added to the transformation reserve, and that this funding is then made available to support the any costs of the mutually agreed resignation scheme and any potential future redundancies. The reserves then link into the authority's balance sheet position. Other key things on the balance sheet relate to the cash and investment balances and the authority's borrowing, which is all covered in more detail within the Treasury Management Appendix to the report. So I'll finish there, but very happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you. Thank you, Rob. Members, David.
Thank you, Rob. I think that was a very clear, concise report. I've got a question about the mutually agreed redundancy scheme, MARS as it's called. It's been open for employees to apply for this since April, so we've had about 3 months. Have we done any projections about the long-term savings that might accrue from this? Is it significant?
So this is one of the things that factors into the organisational design savings that are within the report. So the directors have reviewed the applications that they got for the MARS scheme and looking at the overall requirements for their directorates, and that's the impact of that scheme and other changes that are being worked through is what enables that saving on organisational design to be met. So it's part of that number within the report. Does that answer your question? Yeah, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 questions. The first one I'm not sure actually matters that much, but I'm intrigued that we've got this £10,000 limit on capital cash receipts for counting capital. So if we sell at the auctions 20 fire engines for £9,999 each, it's not capitalised, and those 20 fire engines are worth £20 light of £200,000 against the capital receipt we've got registered of 118. Whereas if they were £10,001, we'd have 200,000 and £20, and you think the difference is tiny, but it seems to kind of skew our capital budget a bit. So I'm interested in knowing whether we have a choice in whether we do that, whether it's our decision. I'm not sure I'd make a different decision, but it's something worth thinking about. That's the first question. Second question is we overspent on supplies and services, and there is an explanation on that. There doesn't seem to be anything whatsoever to do with supplies and services. So I'd be interested in more information about that, please.
Okay, Rob.
Thank you. So the first point on capital receipts, So that is something that's set out within regulations, so it's not something that we have a choice over. So that £10,000 is set out as part of the definition of capital. The question about the supplies and services overspend, so one of the key items within this is to do with operational assets. So this is one of the areas where we have an annual contribution to reserves, and that's to do with the fact that it's difficult and you're not going to have a uniform pattern of needing to incur this expenditure. So what the reserve allows us to do is to smooth that expenditure over time. So typically there'll be some expenditure in a year, and then we'll be able to draw some money from the reserve in order to meet that expenditure. The forecasts that we had for future years were showing that reserve was likely to be under pressure. And so because of the overall position this year, instead of drawing from that reserve and then having to find some money to put into the reserve to top it back up again, we simply haven't drawn the money out of the operational assets reserve and have absorbed the cost within the overall position. The position also includes, so the authority has to, within its accounts, make provisions where there's a likely future cost, and so a provision has been made for some potential uninsured claims from a historic period. So that also factors into the position. Does that help to answer that question?
Okay, thank you. Any more? Karen.
Thank you, Chair. Can I ask the carried forward requests, and thank you for agreeing those, because it's really important, but how are we doing with those projects?
Yes, I can take that. So all of those projects were ultimately delayed through either design stage, so they took longer to design, and that's a combination of technical delays or availability of kind of operational crews to feed into the design. So we have a co-design approach that has obviously been an important part of getting the designs right on those schemes. Also a little bit of a delay on some of them in terms of procurement, so making sure that when we've gone out to procurement, we've not had the tenders back that we would have wanted, so it's taken a bit of time to finalise them. So all are to be delivered, and if the carry forward is approved, then they're all scheduled to be on site. I don't have off the top of my head all of those dates, but yeah, they're all scheduled to be on site in the new financial year, so the current new financial year.
George, please.
Thank you, Chair. We heard from the FBU earlier, David Hunt, that there's a belief if we vote this through today that there could be a reduction of the response time. What assurance can members be given that nothing we decide today will affect the response time negatively?
So the current plans we're making in terms of our change to our operations as well as across the whole workforce are based on the current budget. So they were approved earlier in the year. So really this outturn is highlighting where we came in on the kind of the spend of last year. So the decisions today won't affect that. But that said, the response times, we continue to see across the country actually a growing increase in how long it takes us to get to instance. And we recognise there's a number of factors including involving that or which lead to that outcome, some of which are availability. But we believe that's one of our smallest impacts on our response times. Often response times can be affected by the number of times we go to, say, fire alarms in the cities. Because in the cities we can be there incredibly quickly. In Portsmouth we're there within 5 minutes on the main. So the more of those we have, clearly our average response time is much faster. As we start to reduce those calls, because we don't want to waste our time going to fire alarms, the average response time increases as a result of not going to the quicker ones. So obviously we endeavour to get every single call we have as fast as we can, as fast as safe to be so. So we'll keep a very close eye on our response. And certainly the changes that we're going through this year, we believe will have no impact or very little impact on our response times. That said, I recognise the Fire Brigade Union's position on if this continues. I've already said, and was quoted by our colleague from the FBU on what I said, our operational capability will start to be affected if this financial position continues to as it is. So this time, I don't believe things we're doing will change the response times in the year in terms of impacting directly, but I do believe that this trend continues, it will be difficult for us to maintain our response to the public.
I'm okay to come back, is that
Yep,
right?
yep.
With that noting then, if obviously the automatic responses are obviously changing, which you're saying will impact the response times, how we see it as members, would it be wise, or could we potentially then get a two-stage separate breakdown on what the previous average response times were, excluding those automatic things? Because it's hard to say whether we're getting better or worse if we don't have the data that excludes that from previous years. So is there a way in a future meeting perhaps that we could get access to that data that excludes the automatic response alarms?
Yeah, I had the feeling, and quite rightly too, that more scrutiny will be applied to how quickly we are getting to emergencies, and I think that's really important. The HMI hold us to account, the unions, and indeed our community hold us to account, and via yourself. So yeah, I'm more than happy to do that and break that down. We are certainly, since we changed our standards to and overall expectations across Hampshire and the Isle of Wight, we're certainly keen to make sure we explore what causes the speed of our response. But we know there are several key factors that will lead to the change. But often we're talking about an average of seconds over the whole year. But more than willingly, we'll bring that to you.
David.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Sally, did you want to... you go on.
Sally.
I was actually going to save this until when we got onto the other item on the agenda in the report response times. Within my group, I raised concerns about the response time creeping up to 10 minutes. I noticed that we're still 5-6 seconds below the average. I was told maybe one of the reasons that it's creeping up is that it takes 2 minutes for the actual phone call or something for the fire stations to actually find out that there's a call happening from when the person picks up the phone to report a fire. Is that right?
So I'll bring Robin in a second, but essentially the response time includes the whole sort of point of contact and all of those, the bit in between our control handling and through to the mobilising and through to the arrival on scene. Sometimes we know that in a going instant, our crews won't have a chance to book in attendance because they'll be too busy, understandably, and so we've got an opportunity, like the ambulance crew do, to change how the technology, which tells us they're in attendance. Automatically, that will be much easier because we don't rely on someone pushing a button. Lots of things we can do to really be clear about the actual drivers of our performance there. But that said, we also recognise traffic is much more difficult. We understand also that currently the M27, for example, is a difficult road to travel down and is causing us delays. We know more of our calls are in a rural setting, road accidents in the countryside, therefore it takes us longer to get to. So as the average or our types of call change over the period away from fire alarms, then clearly our overall numbers will adjust as you've described. But equally our handling all through the control room, we will look really carefully at each second we spend on dealing with the incidents to make sure we're as good as we can be. So it's a good time to refocus on that. And certainly in these changes, understandable spotlight is shone on our actual performance. And we want to make sure we really understand where that's coming from. Rob, did you want to add anything to that?
Good morning, members. I suppose the only thing to add on from the Chief Fire Officer is we do have a group internally that are looking at performance times. We're breaking that down to all the touch points from when the 999 call is first received, the telephone is picked up, all the way to our crew pushing the button to say they're in attendance. So we're looking at all the touch points. Clearly, we don't want to tell our drivers to drive faster, because that wouldn't be safe. But there are a number of touch points where if we could bring back some seconds, that would be really good for our members of the public. I know the response time demonstrates that, but it's actually about saving a life at the end of the day. When your question around the 2 minutes, sometimes, unfortunately, people don't know where they are. So when someone dials 999 on the motorway and say there is a car accident, there is a car crash, clearly our control room staff have to try and identify where they are. And that is not easy if you're travelling from somewhere else in the country. You don't know whereabouts on the M27, the M3, the A31, etc. So sometimes it does creep up to that 2 minutes. The quicker they can mobilise, the better to get the end time. So yes, your answer is correct, 2 minutes, but we are really aiming to get that as quickly as we possibly can.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you, Rob, for that, because I think you mentioned the most important thing, which is about saving lives. And my question is to do with any changes that we might be making that not just impact on response times, how long it takes to get to the issue, the problem, the fire, where the appliance is needed, but anything in here that's changing what we turn up with. because you can be 1 minute late and turn up with something that can that's far more capable, and that's probably better, despite the fact that if you'd only measure it by the response time, it would appear worse. So is there anything in there that is changing what we turn up with that is detrimental or of a good thing?
So for the purpose of this report being the outturn report, there's nothing in here which would change that, other than the forward look remains uncertain. So I would say the more certainty we have as a sector, I think it's the same goes for policing, the same goes for our trade unions, the more certainty we have in the future, the more we can plan. Unknowing what or not knowing what our settlement will be next year is really unhelpful. Not knowing what will be in 2 years or 3 years' time is equally as unhelpful. So we can make a long-term strategic plan about the safety of our community if we were to know what sort of funding is available to us.
Roger.
Thank you. On the page 32 and 8H, talks about the third-party payment of 1.92 overspend. The fire service NFSP, I thought was very similar to the Motorola one, but is it or is it not? Because it seems strange being 1.92 overspend there, then getting the 661,000 back from Motorola. Because I know the Motorola one has been ongoing for some considerable time, and we will, in the future, I believe, get less to pay for that system because of this court case and the other negotiations which have gone on nationally.
Thank you. So they're similar, related. The Network and Fire Services Partnership, NFSP, is the arrangement between Hampshire and Isle of Wight, Dorset and Wiltshire, Devon and Somerset, and Kent for the control room. So they're related, but they're slightly different things. Thank you.
Thank you. And the other point I was going to make was that on paragraph 17, when the report was done, it was obviously only known about the firefighters' pay increase being agreed. As I said earlier, the Gold Book has been also agreed now, and their date of increase for future years will be the 1st of July.
Members, any further points? Catherine and Rob, any closing remarks? I have. Catherine, thank you for all you've done for us over the past. It's been excellent. It's been comforting. I know David Drew is deeply comforted by your report, as am I. And thank you for what you've done, and the very best of luck in your new adventure. And Rob, welcome again. Yeah. So if we can look at the recommendation, which is on page 29, that the items listed below are noted by the full authority, namely 24-25 outturn position and the Treasury outturn report and prudential indicators. That the items listed below are approved by the full authority. Contributions to the underspend of 1.112 million for the budget equalisation reserve. Transfer of 0.661 million supplier historic credit to the transformation reserve, and ring fencing of this amount for the cost of the mutually agreed resignation scheme and future redundancies. Carry forwards as set out in paragraph 11 to 13, and updated capital programmes as shown at Appendix B1 and exempt Appendix B2. Okay? Could you say?
Doing noted first and then the approval, or all at once, because they're two different things?
What do you think?
Quite happy to do it that way.
Yeah, okay. We can do it that way. So what are we doing?
Yes. Approving it. You're still approving it.
We're still approving it.
One says noted though, doesn't it?
You've lost me.
I think what Councillor Luciani's point is number 3 is a noting report for approval. Number 4 is an approval report. So she preferred to take the 2 lines separately because they're asking for 2 different things. I think that's the point she's trying to make.
Okay. Okay, all right. So, all right, okay. Let's start again. That the items, well, 3, that the items listed below are noted. I asked the 24-25 outturn and the Treasury outturn report and prudential indicators. Are these noted?
Noted.
And secondly, that the items listed are approved by the full authority, namely, contribution of the underspend of 1.112 million to the budget equalisation reserve, transfer of 0.661 million supplier historic credit to the transformation reserve, and ring-fencing of this amount for the costs of mutually agreed resignation scheme and future redundancies, carry forwards as set out in paragraph 11 to 13, an updated capital programme as shown in Appendix B1 and exempt Appendix B2. Are these approved?
Approved.
Happy, Karen? Good. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely spot on. Attention to detail. Brilliant. Okay. Moving on to item 11 on page 71 of your paperwork. Matt, if you would like to introduce this paper, please.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning, members. So this report is our annual performance report and reports on the overall performance of the service from April 2024 to the 31st March 2025. So it is a backward look up until the end of the financial year. I'll just talk you through, as we've done before with these reports, the actual appendix, which has the various detail on it. So on page 82 of your packs, that is the structure of this report. So for reminder, there's 3 parts to this report. The first part looks at the safety plan improvements, so reports back on the 6 things that the Fire Authority tasked the service to deliver over the last year and provides an update on those 6 items. Part 2 provides an overview of all of the performance metrics for the Fire Authority and the current position against those. And then Part 3 looks ahead at the now current financial year, so looks ahead at the April 25 to March 26 period and just provides an overview of the areas of focus for the service over that period ahead. So in terms of part 1 then, page 85 of your packs, there were 6 activities tasked for the service to deliver. 5 of those, as detailed on page 85, are delivered, and 1 has been delayed until July's Fire Authority. That was to allow anything from the government CSR to inform that report. Obviously, we've now got the CSR, and that report is now coming for consideration on the future management of fire contamination in the summer to the Fire Authority. So that is the part 1 of those 6 activities. In terms of part 2, the way in which we've structured this report is the same as previously. So the performance section looks at our 5 priorities in the safety plan, and remember these are the old safety plan because it's looking at a backwards look. So this is the last year where we're looking against our performance against these 5 areas. So page 88 provides a real overview glance of performance, but I'll just canter you through the more detailed sections, and no doubt there'll be questions afterwards. So page 89, number of incidents. So over the last year, there's been a slight 1% increase in the number of incidents attended by the service. This is mainly owing to more vehicle-related fires, but we have seen slight reductions across dwelling fires, particularly single occupancy properties, and a decrease in non-residential property-related fires. False alarms have increased very slightly, which is a trend the authority has seen in previous years. However, we'd expect this figure, and as we've already discussed in this meeting, to decrease in future years as the new policy on attending AFAs comes into force from the 1st of August. So we should start to see the change in the numbers of those false alarms in the future. Co-responding calls have reduced around 9% over the year, but we do still do more co-responding than similar services, and you can see that on the bottom right corner of this graph where you can see our co-responding versus benchmark services. So they still significantly outstrip other services, but the call volumes have reduced. Also important to notice that in the mid-year performance report for co-responding, we summarised the dedication of extra roles to support the crewing of those vehicles, so that work continues. In terms of benchmarking, bottom left of page 89, we benchmark very favourably when comparing our incident volumes with similar services, where you can see that we have lower incident volumes for all incident types benchmarked, with the exception of false alarms, which we've just covered, and equally our corresponding, as I've said, greatly outstrips similar services. So page 90, critical response times, and we've obviously had a brief discussion of that already today, but over the last 12 months, our critical response time average was 9 minutes 49, and as Councillor Goodfellow pointed out, that does include the call handling, so that is from the point of receiving the call right the way through to the mobilising and attending the incident. So this is driven by an increase in proportion of incidents in more rural areas, which take longer to reach. And as the Chief Fire Officer has summarised, there are several factors that go into why that is the case. But our proportion of critical incidents in those rural areas has increased this year from 35% to just over 38%, so 3% additional more rural incidents. So that's around 141 extra incidents over the year in those areas. So clearly that one of the ways we can support that is reinforcing the importance of on-call recruitment to these areas. And you'll see on page 95 of your pack a case study around some on-call recruitment modelling that's been done, which has received national recognition and also recognition through the National Fire Chiefs Council. So some work around how we better target and recruit to on-call stations. Benchmarking in terms of response time, so the very bottom of page 90, we continue to respond to primary fires quicker than similar services, as you can see in that graph there. And the definition of primary fire is in the green box in the bottom right, but that's a national definition for benchmarking. In terms of resource availability, whole time availability, so page 91, it's relatively steady, so a slight drop at 98%, but this is slightly reduced because we've looked at the allocation of resources into other operational areas, including protection and prevention. And as the report says, we've also achieved a 16% reduction in overtime, which has saved around £175,000 of cost in the year. On-call availability, slight increase, so 62%. And as we know and discussed in this forum many times, on-call availability remains a national challenge, but it is actually particularly acute in the southeast of England, where the latest benchmark data for the year 23-24 shows an average availability of 46%. So we are 15% higher than that, and actually we proudly have the highest on-call availability in the region. So that is a really good testament to the work that is done in that area. Also of note, 15 of our on-call stations achieved an availability in the last 12 months of over 80%. So again, there's some really, really good work happening with the dedication of crews out on on-call stations. Page 92, fire fatalities and casualties. So regretfully, in the last year, we saw 13 suspected fire fatalities. It's important to note that they're suspected because 12 of those remain with the coroner to confirm the cause of death. So that figure may change in future reports. And obviously we are still awaiting 4 confirmations from the previous year, and that is just down to the time it takes to go through courier courts and investigations. So there's some stats in there in terms of those fatalities. And in terms of casualties, you can see a high summary there of casualties. And it's important to note on both casualties and fatalities, we do a review. So there's a thematic review of all serious casualties and all fatalities, which is conducted through a fire safety development group, which is a multi-agency group who look to implement learning across different organisations as a means to sort of reduce further casualties or fatalities. So we clearly take part in that work as well. On page 93 is some of our prevention work, so safe and well visits. And there's been huge focus on safe and wells, and we've significantly increased our safe and well visits, as you can see in the top right graph of that page, which is great news. And that increase in terms of the number of the quantity is also mirrored in the quantity, and it's great to see in the bottom left these sort of quality assurance outputs of that, where those that have received a safe and well visit, 89% have subsequently felt safer in their homes, and 87% have changed their behaviour as a consequence of that intervention. So clearly, the closing the loop on genuinely making life safer for those people in our communities. Alongside safe and well visits, we undertake a range of prevention activities, which includes a huge amount of preventative work with children and young people. And over the 24-25 year, as a service, we conducted 527 school visits, which involved 29,000 children who received that sort of education and early intervention support. So from that, we've then had early intervention referrals that come out of those visits as well. So some great work in terms of our prevention team over the year. Fire safety audits, again, these are relatively steady, but actually around 2% more in the year compared to the previous year, but actually a really interesting 54% increase in prohibitions and enforcements. So that evidences that we're targeting those into the right properties and the right businesses and premises. And that is largely driven by, in previous reports, we've spoken about the increase in the investment in that team, and now that team has a greater number of qualified inspectors, which we're clearly now seeing translate into the work and the areas of focus there. On page 96, in terms of some of the internal metrics, staff sickness, so a really encouraging continuation of the reduction in staff sickness rates. So over the year, we lost an average of 11.6 working days compared to 13.4 in the previous year. So that's a decrease of 1.8 working days. And both the short and long-term sickness has reduced. Again, a really good indication of that. Although actually, sorry, correction on that. The long-term is relatively steady. I think it shows as a 1% increase, but there's some percentages in the background. So the rounded up as 90 is relatively steady. That again has come from continued support from our in-house HR team, which has better allowed managers to feel better supported and equipped to provide that support to staff who are off sick, and a real focus on sort of data-driven management of cases and oversight of management of absent management cases. In terms of sickness types, mental health remains the highest cause for sickness, followed by musculoskeletal. And in terms of benchmarking, our whole time and on-call sickness rates are better than average. So they're below the national average, which is really good news. Our Green Book and control remain slightly above national average by a couple of days average. Health and safety, so a 19% increase in health and safety events. And this is not surprising, and we've had a real focus internally on driving health and safety as a positive culture and really driving the reporting of near misses and sort of cause for concern observations. And you can see that in the split between leading and lagging, so leading being those near misses, so indication of a positive culture where people are reporting potential things that could cause injury. So clearly that sort of light teal colour bar is really healthy. In terms of riddles, we have had 17 riddles. In terms of benchmarking, that's not unusual, and actually we are slightly higher than average, but the main cause for most of our riddles are due to length of time. So anything over 7 days needs to be reported as a riddle, and a lot of our incidents tend to be over 7 days for sort of individual reasons. There is no theme or consistency across those. They're all sort of separate incidents. In terms of public value, there's an update there on the cost per resident. Again, in terms of benchmarking, £43.50 per population versus £48.28, so below average for cost of resident, so value for money, and then the reserves is a repeat of what was in the previous item. Income generation over the year achieved, we've achieved £6.2 million of income, which represents around £500,000 increase on the previous year. That is largely due to additional grants, the sale of fleet where we've had a high turnover of fleet vehicles. Rental income from our estate, which accounts to around £1.3 million of income, and some one-off income from hosting various events where we've recovered the costs associated with those. Efficiencies, we've obviously provided that update in the previous report, so I won't cover it here. Page 101, in terms of staff development and PDRs, we have had the highest completion of PDRs for the last 4 years, as you can see on the bottom chart of page 101. So 95% of staff recorded a PDR in the previous financial year, which is clearly good news. In terms of diversity, on page 102, we continue to see increases in our disclosure rates, which is positive, particularly around gender and ethnicity. They both have remained flat, however, but we are continuing ongoing efforts to increase disclosure rates further. But it's important to note that actually of religion and disability disclosure and sexual orientation disclosure all have increased quite significantly from the 2024 to 2025 year. So it's encouraging staff are feeling confident to provide that information from the outset. Carbon reduction on page 103. We've achieved a 17% reduction in our baseline emissions since 2019-20 and remain on track to hit net zero by 2050, although the immediate milestone is 2030, where we remain on track to achieve that. And we continue to benefit from the authority's investment in carbon reduction initiatives. And then on page 105, SSRI information. So this is the risk information associated to specific buildings or sites, and remains at 100%, so all in date and accurate for those buildings. And service learning, there's been a real focus on ensuring that learning that is submitted is applicable. We can apply it and actually learn that for the benefit of the organisation. At the bottom of page 105, you can see a summary of how that splits between operational learning and organisational learning on that table. And then in terms of looking ahead, page 109 just summarises what the authority approved back in February 2025, which was the new safety plan up to 2030 and the 5 new strategic objectives. So in the future, this performance report will assess our performance against those 5 rather than the current 5 that are in this report. Thank you, members. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, Matt. Stephen Parker, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got 2 questions. The first one is, it says somewhere, I can't tell where because my laptop's died, that we've got an increase in vehicle fires. I'd be interested to know if we know why. And the second question I've got really comes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of call-out times. Do we have the technology in our control room to locate a mobile phone that's calling in? It just strikes me as if we've got a problem with people not knowing where they are. That might help us to find out where they are. Thank you, Chairman.
So what we're going to do with response times is look at incidents, and there is a working group set up to explore, as we've sort of briefly discussed, the various factors that go into response times. So yes, RTCs in the past have, particularly in rural areas, have driven up the response times. So we need to take a more holistic approach to all of the different metrics that go into that response time and understand all the different causes. So yeah, we will absolutely are doing that work. And I guess there may be conversation around bringing that work back to Fire Authority or an APAG in the future, so you understand it. We've also discussed splitting out the AFAs so that you can see that in a bit more detail. In terms of the control room, I'm not sure around the triangulation. And Rob, do you know that answer?
Yeah, so from a mobile phone signal, they triangulate between a number of masts, so you get a rough idea. What our control room are asking people, if they don't know, is what 3 words. So people have what 3 words on their phone. More and more people have that now, and that gives you an absolute precise location. Now that's on their app, and they've already got that. Brilliant. If not, they're trying to talk them through that to get that piece on there. Home telephone numbers, the old, I always call it the old way of home telephones. They will absolutely know where you are in the property, but mobile phone is triangulation. Cover car fires. So from a car fire's point of view, the natural tendency at the moment is to point towards electrical cars. We're not seeing a huge increase in those areas, although they are there. It's important to remember a car fire could be anything from someone stealing a car and then setting fire to it, to someone else maliciously walking past setting fire to it, to a mechanical fault, to a number of different reasons why that has happened. So we do have that data, and that might be something that we can also share through a next APAG, so we can see the split of what that looks like.
David Drew.
No, thanks, Chairman. In fact, I think my question on vehicles and whether it's electrical vehicles that are worse than others has been answered. It sounds like it's a bit more complicated than that. I've got a couple of questions, but just a general observation. Well, firstly, I think this is a great report. I think the document that we've got, we can hand out to residents and they'll get it. There's a lot in there, but I think broadly speaking that they'll get it. That's great. But I just want to pick up on a theme that I'd mentioned earlier, which was to do with response times. And the point that I was making with regards to getting there with the right kit is at least as important, if not more important, than turning up 5 seconds earlier. And I can give the example. It's in context, but it's slightly different in that if you're trying to get an ambulance to someone, if the ambulance takes 10 minutes to get, if the ambulance takes 10 minutes to get there, that's bad. If a first responder gets there in 7 minutes, that's good. And if they're turning up with the right kit and saving the life, that can still be bad. But turning up with something that is helpful but inadequate is seen as good. So we need to make sure that we're identifying what we turn up with is the right. So whether that be good, positive staff training, staff well equipped to meet the requirements, is equally as important as getting there in the time frame. I also wanted to ask a question about safe and well visits, and particularly the preventative activities. Now, page 93, we see a very significant jump in those visits, and I was wondering if we yet have a correlation between preventative visits and reduction in numbers of fires and events that we need to go to, because that would allow us to consider spending more on preventative measures if we had a clear correlation with how many more lives we were saving. And just a general observation about carbon reduction, yes, that's great, page 103, it's going in the right direction. We all know how important it is, and it's good that we are, as an authority, playing our part. There's a couple more things that I might mention in due course if we don't run out of time, but those are a couple of questions that I have. Thank you.
Just if I speak to the general commentary about the what we report to the public and indeed via the Fire Authority, there is a fair bit of debate nationally, actually. In fact, Sabrina's leading the work for the National Fire Chiefs Council on what does performance, what does good look like. And one of the challenges we have, I guess, is we can provide all sorts of data about weight of attack, speed of response, all those sorts of things. But I agree, speed of response isn't the only success measure. Now, the community think we get there quickly, everyone's saved. Now, there's some school of thought years and years ago about, a person on a motorbike can get there really quick, but actually with a fire, what can you do? Actually, not much. So you're right, the weight of attack, but this is why the 2-minute part is quite important in this conversation. The longer our control room spends just identifying what the needs are, actually what's on fire, where it's on fire, the better response we can send. So people think sometimes they live in a very tall building, and it's actually not tall when you compare it to a block of flats, but it's tall because they live in the tallest building in the street. So use language sometimes doesn't help us. So our control room operators are trained in getting the right information out of people, and that's why we at first don't mind spending a little bit longer trying to understand exactly what's going on so we can make sure the right weight of attack is sent. But that said, that should not slow down the fact that we get on the road to assist people who are in danger. If there's a fire, we'll mobilise quickly. But you can't mobilise the location you don't know, taking the point earlier that Councillor Parker raised. So we do spend a lot of time making sure we identify location, but importantly, what's there. So certainly some services report on the weight of attack, how many, when the second appliance turns up and other things, and that we have that data. We don't tend to report on it. Equally, a number of firefighters in attendance. Work the Fire Brigades Union did years ago, actually, on how many firefighters do you need to effectively conduct a role, a firefighting role or a rescue role or an extrication role in a car crash. All those things can be done. The difficulty is you get more data, it becomes less easy for the public to understand. And so what we tend to do is use high-level data to report to you and indeed to the public, which can be then drilled down into, which you do. So that's kind of how we try to position the data. But we're very data-rich now, much compared to where we were. But the challenge is always how much data do you release to the public, which explains what we do. But we try to make that available on our website and other places, but it's kind of, it has to be drilled down into in terms of making it accessible for people to understand exactly what it means. Rob, do you want to add anything to that?
I suppose the only thing to add is our planning. So if you look at it as a chief complaint, as in what's on fire, what the incident is, we have different plans for that. So we have predetermined attendance. So if you said the house was on fire, we know exactly what to send and when. If it was house on fire with someone trapped, then we'll enhance that PDA. So if there was a high-rise fire, there's a predetermined, that lump of equipment goes straight away. They can make up as well afterwards, but we know that that's a really good start to be able to deal with those incidents. So that helps us get over the capability of what's there, because the capability is trained people with the right kit as quickly as we possibly can. So we look at that on a daily basis, really, to make sure our plans are up together.
Just on your point about Safe and Wells, so again, a role I was doing nationally for the National Fire Chiefs Council was prevention, which is very much this work in terms of the evidential basis for does it actually save lives and prevent fire, death and injury. Now, we've seen over that period, over the last probably 25, 30 years, death and injury has over halved in terms of the UK's impact. That's not to say the most vulnerable aren't still vulnerable, and they still struggle with being able to identify them for themselves, the risks they face day by day. So certainly this sort of work we've refined over the years. So it used to be a smoke alarm fitted and we'd leave the occupant at it. Now the smoke alarm is only part of the answer, so very much now about educating occupants about understanding how they can prevent fire in the first place, the likely cause of fire in their particular place, how they might change their habits, their lives to make them more safe. A smoke alarm is on top of that to make sure they get early warning if a fire does occur. But for many, they are quite vulnerable, so working with social services, with other agencies to make sure we provide a multi-agency response to making them safer is really where the most impact occurs. So really this way we do our evaluation is, so you've changed your behaviour because you understood what we've told you, then subsequently in 6 months' time, does it remain changed? Or do you go back to the behaviour you were carrying out before? And that's really the kind of subject of our evaluation nationally, which has shown really, really big strides. So yes, I would always support putting more resource, more finances, more focus on prevention, because one, it's much cheaper than cure. But that said, there's always a balance between being able to respond in an emergency situation, because sadly people will always do things which leave them in harm's way. So we will do our best to continue that. We've made massive strides into this. I'm delighted to see such an uplift in our focus on our most vulnerable in our communities.
Just a quick comeback on the response and the control room and the script that we have. And I'm sure we've all watched the programmes when it's the ambulance service and, is the patient breathing thing seems to be the first question. And then they have a script that they follow through. And picking up on Rob's point about making sure that we're sending the right appliances and the right kit. There is presumably a script. I'd love to know what it was actually, out of interest, because we're all so familiar with what we hear the ambulance service say.
Absolutely, we can supply that. We had a success last week where 2 members of the public were saved, one from the ground floor and one from a ladder. So kind of old school, as always like firefighting, where they pulled someone out from a first floor window with the whole building on fire, and our control room stayed on the line to the individual upstairs from minute of call all the way through to being rescued, and it's called fire survival advice. So as much as the call we said was 2 minutes, as soon as they mobilise, they can stay on call and help them survive in a fire. So it was a really good incident we had last week, and we can maybe make a date in a diary. We can go and see the control
room. David Harrison, please.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to start by acknowledging the amount of work that sits behind these reports. I think the reports are really excellent, And when we're visiting our parish councils or our residents associations, they're a really useful reminder and an aide-memoire for all the amount of work that we do across a whole range of issues. So very, very welcome. It's just a thought with the response time issues. It was interesting to hear from the Assistant Chief Fire Officer that people sometimes are asking for help, but they don't know where they are. I do think this app, What's 3 Words, is really, really useful. And I just wonder, because it's a free app, would we have a difficulty as a service giving more publicity to it? It's interesting that Sally didn't even know about it. So, you know, if Sally, a member of the authority, wasn't aware of it, I suspect there's an awful lot of people out there who would also benefit from having it. And it's a good example, isn't it, of the community helping themselves?
Yeah, it's a really good point. I'm not sure the legality, so I'll check with Paul afterwards, and we'll see where that goes.
Lou, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the report. It is actually very digestible and really, really useful. I have got a couple of questions, but it's more about our own staff. So I wanted to find out a little more about perhaps are we aware of the reasons perhaps why females are less likely to want to join the service, and are we doing anything proactive regarding staffing and encouraging more women to come forward? And the other thing was about sickness, which is, you know, nobody wants anybody's staff to be ill, but it was concerning to hear that actually it's some of the control and the support staff that are ill. Is any work being done to help people? It's just reassurance, really, that these are being addressed. I could go into all the different categories of the protected characteristics, but they're the ones that kind of stood out. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take those questions. So in terms of our work around female recruitment, we have done quite a bit, particularly around our whole-time firefighter recruitment, and we've just come to an end of a process about that. So probably at a future APAG, I'll be able to update you on the impact of some of the positive action that we've taken to really try and increase and diversify the range of candidates that we've had for whole-time recruitment this time. But I know that for the next course, we will have a 25% intake of females of new trainees. So that's a positive step forwards, but we know that we need to continue to reduce any kind of barriers to those kind of seldom heard groups in terms of their entrance to our organisation and to our service, particularly amongst the operational roles. But happy to kind of give more information at a future APAG around that. And then in respect of sickness, yes, I think as Matt has touched on in the performance report, we are pleased to see that sickness levels are reducing. We are very conscious of the amount of change going on within the organisation currently, and some of your colleagues have already mentioned the mutually agreed resignation scheme that's been open to our sort of Green Book support staff workforce over the last few months, and I think it would be fair to say that that has had an impact in terms of how they are feeling, and we know that we see amongst our Green Book staff a kind of higher than desirable mental health related absence. So that is a focus for us. We're doing huge amounts of work in terms of making sure that we have a good well-being offer for our staff and that they feel supported in terms of their mental health. The HR team are working proactively with managers and kind of chasing and supporting managers in trying to return staff to work as quickly as possible when they're fit and well to do so. But it remains a kind of real focus for us moving forward.
Thank you very much. And I absolutely agree about the concerns about health and wellbeing of staff going forward, particularly given what we've heard from the Fire Brigade Union earlier. Thank you.
Chief.
Thank you, and thanks for the question. And I know Molly and her team have got a really good grip on this. I guess it goes back to how we opened the session today with the deputations to the Fire Brigades Union. One of the things I know, at the moment we're making the decisions which are right, one, for the budget that we've set, but two, also right for the conditions that we face. My fear going forward will be very much that you're having to make decisions not on the basis of what you want to do, because what you have to do, and that's the fear about what happens next in the future years. So, as I've said out loud and was quoted earlier, we're doing some stuff now I'd rather not do in terms of reducing firefighters or reducing some staff, but actually we're trying to do the least worst things in terms of protecting our communities, protecting our people. But I think we're going to hear a lot more from our staff how upset they are about things as we go forward. So I guess it's just setting that out as we see it. I know no one in this room can make that better, but it is trying to do the right things at this time for our community.
Thanks, Chief. Karen.
I just want to go and talk about prevention again because it's so important, and actually concur with David about this has got some great points, and as a community leader I can use a lot of this to empower my residents. But that made me think about the things we're learning, Rob, that you're doing at the moment, etc., how that will feed through to a media plan about actually educating people. For example, you know, the false alarms and the things that we're going to do in the daytime, and how people can stop fires quickly without having to call, all of those things. Do we have a media plan that's going to feed all into this?
We do very much. So not only the consultation, the outcome of the consultation, and so, for example, Rob spoke about earlier, the changing automatic fire alarm response is a great example where we've gone to consult the business community, because that's what it really focuses on. Business community, when their fire alarm sounds, historically would have come to their fire alarm. There's no fire. It's a false alarm. But we recognise when we respond, they don't know that. So really what this change is about is recognising that they've got a role to play. It's their fire alarm. It's there to warn the occupants of their building. And they've got responsibility to make sure they're taking care. So most often it's not a fire, therefore they don't need us. But quickly call us if they have got a fire. That's the issue. So you're right, there's about making sure the responsibility sits where it should be sitting, but equally the education is where it's needed. When it comes to people's homes, we'd always say, if you're in doubt, please call us. There's not a restriction on that. But we do need to make sure we give the people best chance of not having a fire in the first place. So general care about things like candles. So if you like, education comes through not only face-to-face, our staff going to their houses or going to where they live, but equally online. The online safe and well visit you can do yourself. People can do a self-assessment on there, and if it triggers a certain level of risk, it will trigger into our own cause to visit people to assist. So we have a range of kind of comms machinery, not only in making sure the press are aware, but via our website, via social media, via our own staff on the ground, and via partners, of course, to make sure people can access the support they need. So members, certainly if in your contact with your communities, please, if you think people need flagging to us, flag them up and we'll make sure we contact, and you can welcome any member of your constituency to do the same thing as well.
Roger.
I have heard on the radio in the last few days, I think it was Dorset and Wiltshire, who produced this video to do with lithium batteries and the risks and what have you. That, as we are connected with their control room, is there any chance of us getting hold of that video and either rebranding it under our name or branding it still with their name and putting that out to the public as well? Because that risk with those lithium batteries is very high, as we all know. And the more publicity we can give to it, the better. So can we filch that video? And is it worth having?
Yeah, I think the short answer to that is yes, of course, we want to work collaboratively with other services, particularly those so close. So I'm sure if we haven't already, our comms team will be able to engage and see what the best approach is. And we have lots of campaigns, and taking the point just earlier from Councillor Lucioni as well, and that might be one of them for the future, but our cook campaign and various other things, which are all resources on our website. So that's another sort of awareness raising campaign. But if they've done good work, I haven't seen it, I don't know if you've seen it, then yeah, we can put it on the website and push it out, I'm sure.
Just want to add something, because this has become quite a topical issue recently. So you're right, lithium ion has become a growing concern across the world, actually. But there's a couple of things to be clear. Lithium ion in itself is not overly hazardous, in as much as if it catches fire or is faulty or is damaged, it becomes a difficulty for the fire and rescue service. If it's managed well and in line with the manufacturer's instructions, it can be absolutely fine. Because there's always a difficult, because it's a very, very useful tool and a very useful energy source for lots of changes to our communities. but we do have a very clear guidance for what we expect people to do in their buildings, like not have a electric scooter, e-scooter in their hallways, no such place to keep them outside. So if they do go faulty, they don't affect your means of escape. Things like that, all available on our website. But we'll certainly, to answer the question, certainly look at that video. I guess I fear that suddenly it becomes the kind of the thing which is the most risk, and actually it's just one of the risks we face. Handled correctly, handled appropriately, kept in the right place is absolutely fine.
I think just to add, sorry, on that point, Councillor Price, on our website we have a campaign called Don't Be Shocked, which is links to lithium ion, and on there's a video from our comms team called Molly's Story, not this Molly, different Molly, around a flat fire in New Milton, and that was the cause linked to lithium ion batteries. So there are some things on the website already under safety which can be used for that kind of point.
Sally.
Yeah, very similar to Roger's question. Something that I'd seen on social media, can't remember the fire service, it might have been Leicestershire, about windowsill fires, and that was really good. I shared that video, but it'd be quite nice if we could do our own stuff, so we're getting our own name for saying that we're looking at these things. Yeah, my lithium battery Hoover charger just never gets charged when we're not there, and my daughter told me off the other day because even though my charger wasn't in my laptop, I'd left the switch on. And she said, that's a live wire. I said, but it's not plugged into a device. So I've obviously trained them a bit too well.
Good child. Members, any more on this paper? Matt, thank you. Very digestible. Excellent paper. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the comments around the report, which I'll pass on to the team. I know they do work hard to make that a digestible report, so thank you.
If we can move to the recommendation, which is that the 24-25 annual performance report be noted by the full authority. Noted? Okay, thank you. I'll agree. Anything. Okay, moving then on to item 12. To resolve that the public be excluded from the meeting during the following items of business, as it is likely, in view of the nature of the business to be transacted or the nature of the proceedings, that if members of the public were present during these items, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information within paragraph 3 and part 1 of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 72, and further that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information for the reasons set out in the reports. So I propose that it be agreed that we move to exempt sessions, if that is okay with you. Agreed. Agreed? Agreed? Okay. So, Sparks, turn us off. Good. So who's not allowed?